Raw power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers through absence, precise and intentional. You didn't simply leave. You vanished with surgical grace, leaving a silence so potent it altered the air itself. No grand exit, no final words, just a void that echoed louder than any goodbye ever could. Your absence wasn't a retreat, it was a message. Every ignored message, every unanswered call became a quiet testament to their insignificance. They reached for you in confusion, only to grasp at emptiness. And in that emptiness, the truth crystallized. You hadn't just left. You dismantled the illusion of permanence they built around your presence. Their emotional circuitry short-circuited. What they once took for granted transformed into fixation. Your silence wasn't absence, it was revelation. Their entitlement shattered and reassembled into longing. Now they revolve around a memory, magnetized by the very quiet that undid them. This was no outburst, no manipulation. It was sacred. It was alignment, a divine unfolding in real time. They mistook your light for something free, something always available. But your energy was never meant to be consumed without reverence. You don't beg, you don't chase, you don't explain. You disappeared not to escape, but to evolve. Not diminished, but distilled. Not weakened, but awakened. You didn't vanish, you rose. That choice sent shockwaves not just through their emotions, but through the spiritual fabric that once bound you together. The void you left behind became haunted ground. Their souls now circle that space, pulled by the gravity of what they lost. They thought they had time, thought they had control, but chosen ones never operate within the confines of borrowed energy or broken timelines. You did not shrink yourself to fit their comfort. You did not explain your worth to those unwilling to listen. And in that final irreversible moment, you didn't just leave. You became the lesson. A lesson they never saw coming and one they will never forget. Because while the mind can brace itself for arguments, storms, or even slow departures laced with warnings, nothing prepares the unworthy for the merciless grace of your exit. Now they sit in the wreckage of what once was, aching with a pain that no closure can touch. And the irony, the deeper their devastation, the stronger their reverence. The loss doesn't breed resentment, it breeds obsession. They go over every word, every shared moment, desperately combing through their memories in search of a misstep, a clue, a mistake, anything that could explain their downfall. But there was no single misstep. There was only the inevitable consequence of failing to honor greatness when it stood in front of them. You were not someone to be underestimated, and yet they did. They assumed there would be another chance, a round two, a moment of return. But you do not linger where you are not valued, and your silence was not an opening. It was the closure. They thought your absence was temporary, a storm to wait out, never realizing it was the final sentence handed down with irreversible conviction. No dramatics, no warning, no second chances, just the finality of your energy leaving for good. At first, they brushed it off, assuming they could fill the void with distractions, people, noise, or shallow victories. But the silence began to creep in, slowly at first, then all at once. It wrapped around their thoughts, infiltrated their routines, and dulled everything they once found joy in. The color drained from their days, and even the victories they once celebrated now felt hollow and weightless. The truth became unavoidable. What they once overlooked was never ordinary. It was the very power that held their world together. And now it was gone. When they finally realized you were serious, when it hit that you were not coming back, their entire world began to collapse. The structure they built around your presence could not stand without you. They mistook your grace for dependence and your silence for weakness. But you were the foundation, and when you left, everything fell. Your departure wasn't just an emotional decision, it was a spiritual extraction. You didn't simply leave. You reclaimed every fragment of energy they had once taken for granted. You retrieved your essence, your frequency, your sacred presence. And what you left behind was not just emptiness, it was an echo that would follow them, a hunger they could never feed again. This wasn't a breakup. It was a soul shift, a spiritual earthquake that cracked the very fabric of their reality. They tried to move on. tried to forget, but the space you occupied became a void they could never fill. And the harder they tried to replace you, the more they felt the depth of what they lost. They do not resent you for it. They revere you for it. Because in losing you, they encountered their greatest teacher. The lesson that you were never meant to be possessed, only honored. Your presence was not something that could be imitated or substituted. It was etched into their subconscious like a sacred code woven into their inner architecture. Now every moment of stillness echoes with your absence. Every silence becomes a space haunted by the memory of your energy. They search for traces of you in the people they meet, in the places they go, in the noise they create. But you are nowhere and everywhere, a presence too powerful to duplicate. Because chosen ones are not replaceable. You weren't simply seen or heard. You were felt, imprinted into their soul. And now, no matter how far they run or how many stand-ins they try to install, the void remains, and it always will. Even in your absence, your essence lingers like a haunting presence, an invisible force that refuses to be erased. Instead of fading with time, the distance has only intensified their obsession. What they once ignored now consumes them. The space you vacated has become a vacuum, pulling them deeper into fixation. The casual moments they once overlooked are now dissected with reverence. They replay every interaction, overanalyzing each word, desperately searching for hidden meaning, though you offered none. But you are no longer accessible. You are beyond reach, beyond explanation. The chosen ones owe no final words to those who refused to listen when it mattered most. You are not some nostalgic memory to be revisited. You are a living, breathing force, ever evolving, always moving forward, untouchable and unstoppable. They don't truly want to forget you because forgetting would require admitting the most painful truth, that they will never experience anything like you again. It wasn't just your presence they were drawn to. It was your divine energy. They fed on it like spiritual parasites, surviving off your light without ever earning it. But chosen ones are not meant to be drained or reduced to reservoirs for others to consume. You didn't leave them in darkness. You simply took your light back. And in that moment, the truth surfaced. They were never strong, never whole, never self-sustaining. Their strength was borrowed. Their confidence, an illusion crafted in the glow of your spirit. Without you, everything fractured. The mask fell, the cracks spread wide, and all the parts of themselves they avoided now rise to the surface, demanding to be seen. Your presence had kept their illusions intact, quietly stabilizing their chaos. But with your departure, the architecture of their reality crumbled. Now they wander through the ruins, desperately searching for another fix, another version of you, another source of that divine frequency. But nothing compares. They reach out to echoes, shadows, half-hearted replacements, hoping to recreate what was lost. But the truth is brutal. That reality only existed because you allowed it, and what you gave cannot be copied. Chosen ones don't return to what's broken. You don't loop back into old cycles or water deserts that refuse to bloom. You don't concern yourself with the hunger of those who refuse to nourish themselves when they had the chance. Let them search endlessly, restlessly, chasing the ghosts in others, because there is no substitute for you. There never was. There never will be. You removed yourself completely. Yet your absence now rings louder than your presence ever did. You made them crave what they once dismissed. And now they are left grasping for something that cannot be replicated. Because what you carried was not of this world. It was divine. And divinity does not beg to be understood. You don't need validation from those who never saw your worth when they had you in front of them. You've ascended past the need for approval. You are beyond imitation. You are beyond reach. You are the standard, not the exception. And now they know. Quick pause, family. If this message is stirring your soul and you're feeling led to support this sacred work, feel free to buy me a coffee. Your energy helps keep this space filled with truth, light, and divine clarity. The link is in the description. And if this message hits home, drop number 88 in the comments below. Let's keep going. Now they are mesmerized, utterly captivated by the very qualities they once dismissed, laughed at, or outright belittled. The traits they once labeled as too much or too different have become the only thing they can think about. The silence they once brushed off as coldness or pride has become the most haunting sound they have ever known. Your refusal to explain yourself, to lower your vibration for their understanding, to argue or defend your truth, it turns you into a mystery, a riddle wrapped in grace, a sacred enigma that their minds cannot solve. While they looked for closure, for another chance, for one final conversation, you gave them nothing. Because the chosen ones don't explain what was already made clear. You spoke through presence, through actions, through divine alignment, and they chose not to listen. And now your silence speaks louder than any words ever could. You did not need to chase anyone because the chosen ones never chase. You withdrew, you observed, you moved in silence with surgical precision. And in that divine detachment, you became something they could never touch again. You became untouchable, ungraspable, an echo of a frequency their souls can't forget. What once felt familiar and even predictable has now transformed into a haunting mystery, a paradox they can't unravel. They thought they had you figured out, believed they could read your emotions, anticipate your next move, control the narrative. But now all they truly understand is the depth of their own miscalculation. And that realization alone is enough to unravel everything they once believed about power, connection, and control. They now sit in reflection, stuck in an endless loop of memories, replaying every moment, every conversation, every glance, wishing they could go back, desperate to rewrite the story, hoping that if they could just find the right moment, the exact point where everything shifted, they might be able to fix what's already sealed. But what they don't understand is this. The chosen ones do not leave because of one moment. You don't vanish over one mistake. You exit when the cycle has fulfilled its spiritual purpose, when the divine contract has expired, when your role in their growth has been completed. And once the exit is made, it is irreversible. There are no do-overs, no resets, no emotional negotiations that can change the decree of spiritual law. Now the door is shut firmly, and their regrets have become their torment. You stop chasing, and now they chase ghosts. What they once treated as a constant, a fixture in their world, has now become a phantom forever out of reach. Your departure wasn't gradual. It was seismic. It shifted the energetic field between you and them in an instant. They never expected it because they were so convinced your presence was permanent, something they could depend on indefinitely. They thought you would always be there, always available, always forgiving, always giving. But the chosen ones are not predictable. You are not stagnant. You are not made of the energy that tolerates being unappreciated. You do not remain where you are mishandled. You do not continue to offer your light to those who choose to stand in the shadows. Your absence has become a force in itself, a power that they feel but cannot touch. And as they try to chase the version of you that no longer exists, you continue to rise, unshaken, unbothered, untethered by their confusion. What they don't understand is that your exit wasn't a retreat. It was a transformation. You didn't just walk away. You left a mark, a spiritual seal, a subconscious imprint that now shapes their every thought. Your withdrawal created an invisible fortress, one they cannot access no matter how hard they try. You rewrote the spiritual architecture of the space you once shared. Now they exist in a world where you are no longer physically present, yet your essence lingers in every corner. Every room they enter whispers your name. Every silence they encounter is filled with your echo. They try to distract themselves, to move on, to fill the void with noise and new faces. But nothing works because your presence was never ordinary. It was foundational. Your energy was not something they felt with their hands. It was something their soul wrapped itself around. And now that absence is not a void. It is a presence. It presses against their consciousness like a reminder of everything they lost but never truly valued. The harder they try to forget you, the deeper they fall into the pull of your energy. Every effort to detach only binds them tighter. Because what you brought to them wasn't love alone. It was light. It was clarity. It was healing. And now they are spiritually starving. They revisit the past, not because they miss you, but because they are still trying to understand you, to decode the sacred frequency that once enveloped their entire being. But it's futile because what they seek isn't a moment, a memory, or a version of you. What they're really searching for is the divine force that radiated from you, the one that stabilized their chaos, the one they never had within themselves. They didn't just lose you, they lost the version of themselves that only existed in your presence, the stronger, wiser, more aligned version of themselves that your energy helped reveal. That is why their longing isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. And the pain isn't for what was shared, but for what they can never access again. Because you've grown beyond them. You've elevated past the point where they can reach. The chosen ones do not regress. You don't return to cycles that have completed. You don't revisit what you've already mastered. And no matter how hard they try, there is no door that leads back to you. They crave peace, not a reunion. They crave wholeness, not conversation. But the truth is that peace existed only in your presence, and now it lives only in memory. And memory, no matter how vivid, cannot recreate the divine. You are not a chapter they can reread. You're the entire book they never learned to understand. And now they read the echoes of your energy in silence, trying to remember how it felt to stand in the light before the light decided to walk away. Now they stand exposed, stripped bare in the aftermath of your departure, aching for something they cannot name and will never reclaim. It's not just you they miss. It's not just your presence, your voice, or your touch. It's the atmosphere you created, the spiritual safety you brought, the clarity your energy invoked without ever needing to speak. They long for a feeling, an alignment, a sense of wholeness that existed only when you were near. And now that you're gone, nothing satisfies, nothing soothes, nothing compares. But the truth they must face, no matter how painful, is this: you were never theirs to possess. You were never theirs to control, to keep, to bend. You were the storm that reshaped them, the divine force that entered their life to awaken what had been asleep for generations. You were not a person to be held on to. You were a shift in consciousness, a disruption to their illusion of control. You didn't just leave. They were altered by your presence, and now forever changed by your absence. And while they remained trapped in the time capsule of what used to be, reliving moments, replaying mistakes, analyzing every silence like a puzzle with no solution, you've already moved forward, untethered, unshaken, and completely unstoppable. They spiral, consumed by regret and fantasy. You rise, grounded in purpose. They grasp at shadows. You stand in light. The chosen ones do not collapse under the weight of distance. They become the very architects of it. You are the gravity that now pulls at their soul, and they don't even understand why. While they attempt to rebuild a life that no longer includes you, patching it with artificial replacements, you remain still, powerful in your detachment. Not because you're heartless, but because your heart is aligned with higher wisdom. You never needed them. That's the truth that burns the most, because they thought your strength was in your love for them, your loyalty, your compassion. But now they understand your true strength was your ability to walk away without breaking. Your power was never conditional. It was sovereign. The storm they now face is not your vengeance. It is their own consequence. It is the echo of disrespect, the mirror of their neglect. And though they may cry out for another chance, another sign, another door, they know deep down that it's too late. The door didn't close with anger. It closed with finality, because the chosen ones don't turn back once a lesson is learned. You weren't moved by ego or bitterness. You were moved by alignment. Walking away was not weakness. It was sacred strategy. It was divine timing. It was the result of a soul that recognized the value of its own energy. You were not reacting. You were responding to the quiet call of your higher self. The chosen ones do not operate in chaos. They move through spiritual signals, through divine confirmation. You didn't leave to make a point. You left because your purpose in that space had expired. And now they sit in the aftermath, not as victims, but as witnesses of their own undoing. The absence you left behind was not punishment. It was prophecy. a revelation of the truth that was always there, but never respected. They now see what they refused to see when it mattered most. That you were the foundation, the anchor, the spiritual glue that held it all together. They mistook your presence for permanence, your loyalty for naivety, your stillness for dependence. But now that you're gone, the mask is off. Their illusion of strength has crumbled, and what's left is the wreckage of their own spiritual negligence. You were the structure they leaned on, the grounding force they exploited without gratitude. And now, without you, everything falls apart. The more you center yourself in peace, the more they dissolve in chaos. They expected you to return. They expected your heart to override your discernment. They thought time and silence would wear down your resolve. But they didn't realize. Chosen ones don't shrink. They evolve. You are not suspended in time, waiting for things to make sense. You are not entertaining the possibility of reconnection. You are not tethered to memory. You are free. And that freedom, that emotional independence is what haunts them most. Your detachment isn't cold, it's sacred. It's clarity. It's the highest expression of self-love and spiritual maturity. You're not looking back because there's nothing there for you anymore. The soil stopped growing long ago. The roots rotted while you were still pouring water. And now you've walked away, not in anger, but in full acceptance. And that, more than anything, is what breaks them. You didn't slam the door. You just stopped knocking. You didn't scream. You simply became quiet. And that silence now thunders in their spirit louder than any argument ever could. You were never meant to stay in a place that couldn't hold your growth. You were never meant to waste your light in places that celebrated your pain but feared your power. And now that you've ascended, they are left chasing ghosts. Ghosts of your voice, your essence, your presence. But ghosts don't come back. They linger only to remind. And the reminder is permanent. They lost something divine, something rare, something sacred, and it will never be theirs again. They realize it now, far too late, that the control they believed they had over you was nothing but smoke and mirrors. A fragile illusion held together by your quiet tolerance, your sacred patience, and your grace. What they mistook for influence was merely borrowed energy. It was the access you allowed, the space you shared, not because they earned it, but because your heart was open. And now that access has been revoked, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with spiritual authority. What once felt ordinary now feels unreachable. The presence they took for granted was never ordinary. It was extraordinary, divine, and rare. And now, as they wander through the aftermath, searching for meaning in a world that no longer includes your energy, you move forward. Steady, grounded, untouchable, and unstoppable. Your separation wasn't just a decision, it was a sacred disruption. It triggered something they weren't prepared for, a complete dismantling of everything they thought they knew about love, power, and presence. You didn't exit quietly, the chosen ones never do. You left behind a silence that roars louder than any confrontation. You created a void that doesn't just leave space, it demands introspection. Your absence forced them to look inward, to face the shadows they once hid behind your light. Because when you withdrew, the entire equilibrium shifted. They could no longer lean on your energy, your emotional labor, your quiet stability. And in that moment, they were forced to confront what they truly were, without the comfort of your presence to hide behind. You were never just someone in their life. You were a mirror, a divine reflection of all that was unresolved within them. Every insecurity, every unhealed wound, every piece of themselves they refused to acknowledge, you reflected it back with truth and love. But instead of healing, they resisted. Instead of honoring the gift, they overlooked it. And when you walked away, the illusions they wrapped around themselves began to unravel, thread by thread. What they once ignored now screams at them in the silence you left behind. What they once laughed at, dismissed, or belittled now echoes through their every thought. You don't have to speak for them to hear you now. Your absence is the voice. It is the teacher. It is the loudest truth they've ever faced. The chosen ones don't teach through revenge or noise. They teach through presence, and even more powerfully through departure. Your absence became the curriculum of their awakening. Losing you was not just a heartbreak, it was a spiritual earthquake. It cracked open the false foundations of their ego, their control, their superiority. You forced them to see that they were never truly in control of anything. The life they built while leaning on your energy is now unstable, and their soul knows it because you weren't just a presence, you were the pulse, the invisible structure holding it all together. And now the world they once thought was safe and predictable that feels cold, strange, and hollow. You were the anomaly, the one they couldn't predict, the energy they couldn't replicate. And now, in your absence, they are left with themselves. No more distractions, no more projections, no more illusions to hide behind. The distractions that once kept them from facing the truth no longer satisfy. The people they used to replace you don't fill the space you once occupied. Nothing hits the same. Nothing feels whole. Because you didn't just take yourself when you left. You took back your light, your frequency, your sacred energy. And without it, they're left staring at the wreckage of everything they ignored. They thought they could dictate the terms of your connection, believe they held the upper hand. But chosen ones are never bound by false authority. Your removal wasn't just a break. It was a portal, a cosmic shift into higher ground. You didn't leave because you were angry. You left because your soul had outgrown the space. Your assignment was complete. The karmic debt had been paid. The spiritual contract had expired. You didn't exit emotionally, you exited with divine alignment. You were never there to stay. You were sent to shift, to activate, to awaken. And once that was done, your time there was over. And now, as they sit in the ashes of their own choices, they finally see you for what you always were. The storm, the sanctuary, the sacred lesson. They never expected you to leave. They assumed your kindness meant permanence. They mistook your consistency for dependence. They believed they would always have access to you. But the chosen ones are not eternal in human form. They are eternal in impact. You didn't leave to punish them. You left because your presence could no longer coexist with their stagnation. Love doesn't always show up through staying. Sometimes the deepest love is shown through distance, and your distance speaks volumes. It says, I gave you what I could, I showed you who I am, I honored you with my truth, and now I must honor myself. You don't need closure because you are the closure. You don't need to explain because your silence already told the entire story. They thought your absence would fade you into insignificance, but instead it amplified your power. It carved your name deeper into their soul than your presence ever did. They now feel you in the quietest hours, in their dreams, in their thoughts, in the hollowness of interactions that pale in comparison to you. They thought they could move on untouched. They thought you were replaceable, but now they understand you are the exception, the blueprint, the divine standard. And everything they encounter now falls painfully short. They try to replace, replicate, and reset, but nothing fills the void because you weren't just another chapter. You were the entire narrative. You weren't an experience. They built a part of their identity around you, and now that part is gone. You are not nostalgia. You are a presence. You are not a memory. You are a force. And here's what stings most. They love you more now than they ever did when they had you. Not because they've grown wiser, but because they finally understand what they lost. But understanding doesn't grant access. Realization does not reopen the door. The chosen ones don't circle back. You don't revisit cycles. You don't entertain the familiar echoes of the past. You evolve, and now you've risen to a realm so elevated, so refined, that all they can do is watch from a distance. Yes, they may ache, they may long, they may obsess, but you are untouchable. That, that is the final power move. Not revenge, not bitterness, but transcendence. You've stepped fully into your higher timeline, untouched by their regrets, unshaken by their absence. They no longer have access to your light, your wisdom, your love. Not because you turned cold, but because they failed to honor what was sacred when it was freely given. The chosen do not wait for applause. They don't pause for validation. They simply become what others only dream of, and they move forward. So now tell your story, not to prove anything, but to shine a light. Let the world see what it truly looks like to rise in silence, to walk away from anything that doesn't nurture growth, to reclaim your divine essence without seeking approval. Let them feel what it means when a chosen one says, I am done, not in anger, but in power, in purpose, and in peace. That's the message for today. Dear Father, strengthen my faith. Teach me to trust you even when there's no evidence in sight. Let my heart rest in the truth of your constant presence, knowing you mean me no harm. Your plans are filled with goodness, with prosperity, and with hope. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always hearing my voice. I lift this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I'm grateful for your presence and the abundance you've placed in my life. If this message spoke to you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Drop a comment below. Tell us about your journey and how you're preparing for your own victorious return. If you'd like to support our mission, consider contributing via Buy Me a Coffee. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your support fuels this work and spreads hope to others. The link is in the description. Don't stop here. Watch our next video to uncover powerful signs that reveal you are one of the chosen. We're honored to walk this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying until the end. Keep shining, keep rising, and step boldly into your destiny. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Yabern. Oh,